Howdy, cowboys and cowgirls. Ultra Cowboy here, and on today's video of Cowboy Up Running, we are going to be discussing how to train for your first ultramarathon or your next ultramarathon. We're going to be talking equipment, nutrition, hydration, leg training, all that and more coming up.
The final climb.
There he goes, across the finish.
All right, so in today's video, I want to talk to you about how to train for your first ultramarathon or your next ultramarathon. And I can speak from experience. If you do not follow the following steps that we're going to discuss today, it is going to make for a very difficult race, and you're going to regret not being better prepared. I can speak from experience from not having finished my last ultra, the Bryce Canyon 100-miler, and it was because I did not follow these steps. So what I want to discuss today are what I call the 5 pillars of ultra training. We're going to go through each of these 5 pillars, what they mean, and how to best train each of them so that come race day, you are as prepared as possible to do well and finish your best ultra marathon, whether it's your first or your next. So the first pillar is you have got to have a strong why. If you do not have a compelling reason to run the race in the first place, when it gets hard, when it gets hot, when it gets cold, when it gets dark, when you feel like crap, when you're feeling depressed, when you have no energy, when your feet and your legs and your back and every other part of your body hurts, and you've still got 10, 20, 40, 60 miles left, if you do not have a strong why, you are not going to be able to finish the race. You have to know why you are doing it in the first place. It's also going to be what gets you through your training. It is not easy to train for an ultra marathon. It's not easy to train for a regular marathon. But even more so for an ultra, because of the amount of time that you have to take, the sacrifices that you have to make in order to get as prepared as possible so that when you toe the line, you can be confident and finish your race. What is it that gets you motivated? Is it specifically the race? Is it you want to run the Western States, the granddaddy of all ultra marathons, and so you need to run a qualifying race to get there? Or is it because of a dedication that you want to run for a friend or a family member? Do you have a sick loved one and that this is your way to kind of cope with that? Do you have someone that's passed away that was close to you and you want to run something in their memory, do something difficult because of who they were and what they mean to you? Is it because you want to do this for charity, some sort of charitable event, some sort of nonprofit that you're raising money for, that you want to be able to run this race and try and raise as much money as possible? Or is it like me, that you want to become the best you that you can possibly be, and in order to do that, you have to push yourself beyond the boundaries that you have limited yourself to? Whatever your reason is, it has got to be a strong one, because if you're doing anything, especially 50 miles or longer, where you're going to be out for 12 to 24 to possibly 48 hours on some of these insane races, when it gets hard, you have to have a reason why this is going to push you to the end. If you find value in this content, or if you just like to watch another man suffer to success, then go ahead and click the like and subscribe. So that's pillar number 1. Pillar number 2 is you've got to train your legs. And this goes without saying. If you're going to run a race, you have to train to run, right? But it is a bit different than running for, say, a 5K, 10K, half marathon, or marathon, because most of those races are going to be run on the roads, and they're a short enough distance that really you're just doing distance training, right? If you follow the Hal Higdon marathon training plan, is a really popular one. And in that plan, you increase your mileage every week. Well, when you do ultra marathons, it's a lot different because 1, a lot of times they're going to be run on trails. 2, the terrain is extremely varied from ultra to ultra, whether that's, something that's high altitude, something that's low altitude, but high humidity. If it's, got rolling hills, if it's got long downhill sections, it's going to destroy your quads. These races are not made for flat speed running. These races are made to enjoy the beauty beauty of nature and get out on the trails and to be out there for extended periods of time. So what I'd recommend doing is, instead of setting a target goal for miles per week, you want to target hours per week. In my most recent training that I've been doing for the Run Rabbit Run, I've been trying to target 9 to 11 hours. I'm in the peak training part of my training season, and so I'm really trying to get those hours in. Now, this is for a 100-miler. If you're doing something shorter distance, if you can get 8-9 hours in a week, that's awesome. But I know all of you are busy. I'm busy. I've got 6 kids. I've got a job. I've got a lot of things that I'm doing as well, and so I make sacrifices because I love running and I love what it does for my fitness, and it's what helps get me out of bed sometimes when I don't feel like going to work or doing other things. But if you're running a shorter distance, say a 50K or a 50-miler, you may only need to peak out at like 6 to 7 hours a week during the end weeks of your training. But whatever it is, you want to target a time, because when you're out there doing a lot of uphill or running out in the heat of the day, you're not going to be able to get the speed runs that you would when you're training for, a marathon or shorter distance on the flat roads. You want to train climate. So we talked about humidity. I live in Colorado where there's dry heat. I don't have to worry about the humidity anymore. When I used to run in Cincinnati or in Columbus out in the Midwest, those summer or early fall races, the humidity was horrendous, and you had to be willing to train in the heat and the humidity because your peak times during your race were going to be in the middle of the day in full sun and full humidity with full gear on. So you've got to train for the climate, the terrain, and the time that you're going to be out there on your feet come race day. Pillar number 3, you got to train the gut. And this is one of the biggest things that people don't do. If you undertrain your legs, you can probably finish almost any race that you want to try to run. It's going to suck, but you can do it. If you do not train your gut, there is no way that you are going to be able to finish a race, especially a long race. If you've ever run a marathon or shorter distance, say a half marathon, but something long enough where you're going to need calories during the race and didn't plan well for nutrition, it may have caused you to slow down at the end, but I can almost guarantee you that you can finish one of those with no problem. 50K, you can probably finish with poor nutrition. It's going to, the last few hours are going to be miserable, but you can do it. If you're running a race that's 12 or more hours long and you do not train your gut, it is a recipe for disaster. That is one of the things that caused me to fail at Bryce Canyon, is I did not train my nutrition. I didn't really train my legs either, but the legs were not a problem. When I finished that race, I wasn't sore the next day. I went out for long runs the following week. My legs were absolutely fine. I had gone through half the climb of the race. It wasn't a leg problem. It was a gut and a hydration problem. We're going to hit that one next. But you have got to train your gut. The recommended calories to take per hour for most people is going to be somewhere between 150 and 250 calories per hour. So think, if you're planning on finishing a race that's 12 hours long, you're looking at taking in at probably over 2,000 calories. 2,000 calories. That's more than some people eat in a day. And you're going to take that in while you're running with all that sloshing around in your gut with slowed gut transit because you're using your sympathetic and not your parasympathetic system to try and run the race. But you have got to train that gut. I would say it's probably more important to train your gut than it is to train your legs. Because again, if you're undertrained for your legs, you can get through it. If you do not train your gut, you may not finish, and if you do, it is going to be excruciatingly miserable. In fact, gut distress, GI distress, gut issues is the number one reason that people do not finish ultra races. Think about that for a second. It's not the legs. It's not an injury. It's not blisters. It's not being dehydrated. It is GI distress from whatever reason it is, and it's usually going to be nutrition. So train your gut. So for example, I'll use gels a lot during my races. Not as much anymore because I've got something else that I like to use. But if you look at this, it's got 100 calories per serving. So if you're doing only goos, you want to plan to eat like 1.5 to 2 of these per hour. For a 12-hour race, that is a crap ton of goos. If you're doing a 100-mile race on just gels, whatever brand, whatever gels you're using, you that is an insane amount of gels. So practice on your long runs when you're out there for 4 or 5 hours on your longest long runs. Train your gut to take in that amount of gel, because if you don't, you're not going to want to eat. You're going to feel sick. You're going to get down on calories. You're not going to have energy for your legs, and the wheels are going to come off the bus, and you're going to crash and burn. Something else that I've used actually more recently is called Goo Roctane. And one of the reasons is it has electrolytes in it. We're going to discuss that in a minute. But it's got calories. It's got 250 calories per serving. So if I put one of these in a 500 ml soft flask, then if I drink that throughout the next hour, I've got all my calories and maybe even a little bit more. And for me, it's just been easy. I like it, but whatever you use, make sure you train with that. So you've got gels, you've got chews, you've got bars. I've used Generation UCAN bars before. They've got, what do they have, like 190 calories per bar. So if you can get down a bar per hour, you're fine. Whatever you're going to pick up at aid stations, if you're going to eat PB&J sandwiches, if you're going to eat quesadillas, if you're going to eat bags of chips, popcorn, pickle juice, Skittles, gummy bears, whatever you're going to eat during your race, eat when you are out on your long runs, and even some of your your longer short runs, because if you don't, it is going to wreck your day. So pillar number 4, hydration. We've got, you got to have a why. Pillar number 1. Pillar number 2, train your legs. Pillar number 3, you've got to train the gut. And I'd say just as important as training the gut, and this is kind of part of that, is getting your hydration dialed in. So there's not necessarily a recommended volume of fluid to take in per hour. That's going to be very different for everybody because everyone sweats at different rates. And so the way that you can determine how much fluid, or get a rough estimate for how much fluid you should be shooting for per hour, is before you do an hour run, you want to weigh yourself naked. Before you weigh yourself, pee, have a bowel movement, whatever you need to do to get ready for your run, do that. But then you weigh yourself naked. And you get that weight and you write it down. And then what you're going to do is you're going to go out, you're going to do your run in your gear with your, I don't know, I'd say a drink. If you drink, you got to keep strict track of what you're taking in. But I wouldn't eat anything. I wouldn't drink anything. Go out for an hour run during the, the type of weather you're going to be experiencing the majority of your run. If it's the heat, the day, at night, whatever it is, you're going to sweat at different rates. So you want to try getting a weight for each of these. But you go do an hour run and come back. And then before you eat or drink or do anything else, strip down naked, weigh yourself again. Whatever the difference is in your weight, for every 1.1 pounds that you've lost 500 mLs of fluid. So if you lose, say, like just over 3 pounds, you've lost 1.5 liters of fluid. So you need to try and target replacing 1.5 liters of fluid during that type of climate for your run. Like I said, if it's night training and it's cooler, you're probably not going to need to take in much more than 500 to maybe 1 liter, 500 mLs or 1 liter of fluid. If it's during the heat of the day and it's super hot and it's a summer run, you might need to try and get in 2 liters of fluid during an hour. So that's a great way to get a rough estimate. But tied and very integral to your hydration, the amount of fluid you take in, is electrolytes. If any of you have ever run a long race without electrolytes and all you've replaced with is water, you are going to get destroyed. You'll get GI distress. You can get horrible muscle cramps. You have got to be taking in electrolytes. And the most important one is going to be sodium. Because when you sweat, you don't sweat pure water. You sweat a saline solution, sodium chloride in your sweat. And if all you replace is water, you're going to get a sodium deficit and it's going to cause havoc. So there are sweat tests that you can do, but in general, you want to target 500 to 700 milligrams of sodium per liter of fluid you're taking in. So the sodium is very much tied to your fluid, because you think you're sweating salt water. What do you need to take in? You need to take in salt water. You need to replace what you've lost. So whenever you're drinking 1 liter of fluid, you want to make sure you're getting the proper amount of sodium in with that. The easiest way that I found to do that, rather than keep track of how many liters and then take salt tablets, which you could do, is I got the Goo Roctane. It's got 320 milligrams of sodium per serving. So I know that in one of my 500 ml soft flasks, I've got 320 milligrams of sodium. So that's perfect for that 500 mLs. So then in my other soft flask, I don't need any more calories per hour. I'll just put in an electrolyte solution. I like to use Generation UCAN or Element, LMNT is another one that I've used that works well for me. They both taste good. They don't taste too salty, but just make sure that you get that sodium correct. It's 500 to 700 milligrams of sodium per liter of fluid that you are taking in. Those two are absolutely critical and tied to pillar number 4 of getting in the proper electrolytes and getting in your proper hydration. And lastly, so pillar number 5 is you have to train your equipment. Any of you that have run any other races, and hopefully you have before you go and do your first ultra, but if you've run a race, like the number one advice you always hear is do not wear a different pair of shoes or different pair of clothes come race day. Why? Because it will wreck your feet, or there's a high likelihood that you will wreck your feet, get chafage. I've seen people cross the line with bloody nipples. They look like they got shot in the chest from the chafage on their nipple just from a marathon, right? And that's, maybe a 4 or 5 hour race. Imagine doing something like that for 12, 15, 30 hours. You have to train your equipment, your pack you're going to use, because it's going to rub in places. You're going to build up calluses. The skin's going to get harder. You need to know what that feels like with that maybe bouncing around, adjusting your pack so it's at the right setting on race day. You want to train with the weight you're going to have. If you're sweating and you need to replace 1.5 liters of water or 2 liters of water every hour, or say there's a big gap where you may not hit an aid station for 2 hours, you're going to have all that fluid on your back. And again, 1 liter of water weighs 2.2 pounds. So if you've got 2 liters, you've got an extra 4 pounds strapped to your back. If you go out and do your runs and you don't run with weight on, you're going to trash your legs come race day, and you're not going to be ready to pack that weight around. Are you going to use trekking poles or hiking poles? Getting used to carrying those in your hands, not getting blisters on your hands. If you put them away, where are you going to put them and stash them? If you're going to use sunscreen, your socks, your shoes, if you're going to use handheld hydration, getting used to running with that in your hand, having it rub so that, you build up the calluses on your hour and 2 hour runs so that you don't, end up rubbing your hand raw and not being able to carry the fluids that you need come race day. So, are you going to take a camera? I love taking cameras. I love getting footage of the beautiful places I go and run on. That is why I run on trails. I don't do road races anymore because I don't like pounding on the pavement with my feet and destroying my legs. I got a bunch of injuries doing that when I was training for marathons. But 2, I love being out in nature, having to do technical stuff, jump over rocks, and recording that it's important to me. I enjoy it. I want those memories. But the camera doesn't weigh nothing. And when you're going with an extra, 0.5 pound to a pound for 100 miles, that adds up. So you need to have all of your equipment on that you're going to use on race day. You've got to train every aspect of what you're going to do. I guess you could say a part of a 6th pillar is mental training. That's really tied to your why, having that mental toughness, because I promise you, if you're out there long enough, part of you is going to say, you know what, just quit. At the next aid station, you're not in this for the prize money, probably. If you're watching these videos, I'm not a super elite ultra runner telling you how to shave off the last, 2 minutes to beat the course record. And so you're not doing it for the money. The belts are cool, but how many people really wear belt buckles around anymore? I have actually worn some of my belt buckles, so they do have some utility. But you're probably not doing it just for the buckle, going out there for 24 or however many hours just for that. It's not for the glory. You really don't have anything to prove to anybody else. It's really about proving to yourself that you can do this. But there's a part of your mind that's going to say, just quit. There's no reason to keep suffering anymore. All you have to do is sit down, just tell them you're done and you're done, right? And when you hit that spot, you have to mentally have that why, saying, you know what? I am not going to listen to that me that's telling me to quit, because I'm going to listen to the me that tells me that I'm a winner, that I can do hard things, that the reason I did this in the first place is because it's hard. You do ultras because they're hard, not because they're easy. If you want an easy run, go do a mile fun run with your kids somewhere, right? That's an easy run. You do ultras because they're hard, and you have to have that why, but you've got to train every other aspect of your race. If you do that, you will not only finish, but you will finish strong, and you will finish being grateful, thanking your former self that you put in the time. So when you put in the time now, when you're training all these things, training your gut, training your hydration, training your mind, training your legs, training with your equipment, You are doing a favor for your future self so that future self can say, thank you, Ultra Cowboy. Thank you, Ultra Cowgirl. Because of you, I'm going to get to this finish line. And when you cross that, there is nothing like crossing that finish line, knowing that you did something hard, you gave it your all, that you suffered, and you came out a better person on the other side. So I hope these tips are helpful. I know that they're helpful for me. I didn't do this for the Bryce Canyon. The wheels fell off the bus, and I gave up and I quit. And I wish I hadn't have, but I did. But I can tell you what, I am training those 5 pillars right now. I am doing things to make myself uncomfortable because I do not want to not finish another race again because I didn't do the training, because I wasn't good enough. If I don't finish, it's going to be because I dragged myself bloodied, scrape-kneed as far as I could, and they said, you know what, the cutoff time, we can't let you go further. But I would have if they would have let me. And that's what I want for you, is to be able to cross that finish line and know that you are the best you that you can be. So get out there, suck it up, cowboy up.